We can hear you now, iPhone. Or we could.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me go ahead on and call the special call meeting to order. And let me ask, Ms. Only, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Can you call the roll for attendance for council members?
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Here, I'm on the phone.
Dickerson, McBride,
Here.
Livingston,
Here.
Horatio,
Here.
Walker,
Here.
Kennedy, Manning,
Here.
Myers,
Ms. Myers did inform me that she'll be probably 10 or 15 minutes late.
okay. Ms. Newton,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I will now entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So move.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moving properly. Second. Mrs. Only, can you call the roll for the adoption of the agenda?
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
I haven't seen an agenda, so the answer is no.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Newton.
No, but only because I haven't seen an agenda.
Okay. Motion passes.
Thank you. What's before us on the agenda is an appeal of business license revocation, Sogen Incorporated, B-A, My Place. It's an item before us. You may recall this is item reference Richland County Nuisance Appearance Ordinance. So this is a public hearing for the appearance, for the appeal of this hearing ordinance regarding My Place. Let me provide some information reference to procedure. And before we move forward, we are here today to hear an appeal from a business established, operated by the name Sogen Incorporated, doing business as My Place, located at 7720 Carter Drive in Richland County. On August 27, 2020, the Richland County Sheriff performed an emergency abatement relative to activities at the establishment. That then implicates the status of the business license for that particular location. In 2019, Council adopted an ordinance addressing public nuisance. As part of the process set forth in that ordinance, Section 18-7D provides for an automatic appeal anytime there is an emergency abatement or a business license is an issue. I will now review the key features of council's appeal process that we'll be going through. First, the record on appeal. The record on appeal shall consist of all documents relevant to the business license or license and the suspension or revocation thereof as submitted by the license official and the license holder of the abated business. Order of presentation. The license official will go first and shall have up to 15 minutes to present relevant, appropriate, and non-cumulative testimony. After the license official has made the presentation, the business subject to the emergency abatement shall have up to 15 minutes in response. Again, subject to the requirement that the presentation be relevant, appropriate, and non-cumulative testimony. Reference witnesses. Witnesses, including those from Richland County Sheriff Department, may be called, but no witness shall be called subject to questioning from the opposing party. Counsel, however, may ask questions of any witness. Regarding time periods, the time period set forth above 15 minutes per party may be enlarged at counsel's discretion, which would require a motion by counsel, and that motion be specific about the time of expansion, whether that's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, what that might be. That motion must be seconded and passed by a majority of council in order to increase the time or change the time. Neither party is required to use all of its allotted time. Therefore, if the presentation is shorter than 15 minutes, the 15 minutes allotted, you may feel free to cover the points you need to cover and end your presentation early if you choose to. Provided over the appeal, the chair of county council shall provide over the appeal and shall rule on objections or matters of preliminary inquiry, and in doing so, may consult with the council's parliamentarian. The rules of evidence during the appeal shall be relaxed, although the relevant material and cumulative testimony or evidence is discouraged and may be ruled out of order by the chair. What this means particularly is that the formalities of a court hearing do not govern this appeal, and latitude generally will be given to the party as long as that party presents relevant information that may help the council in making its decision reference this appeal. Cross-examination. As mentioned, neither party shall have the right to cross-examine any witness or speakers during the appeal, but rather the appeal shall consist of the argument of the parties or their representatives and the testimony of any witness that party desires to include in its presentation. In terms of deliberations, the council shall conduct any deliberations on the appeal and shall render its decision in open session. Nothing in this session prohibits county council from taking a recess or from entering into executive session as provided pursuant to the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, provided that during such session, the merits of the appeal are not discussed. A decision rendered by county council pursuant to this order shall constitute a final decision of the county. That decision will take the form of an approval of the licensed official or the county's action taken with respect to the emergency abatement, or overturning such action, or any other appropriate disposition council may make pursuant to the present nuisance ordinance. Are there any particular questions for clarification reference to procedure from our ordinance? If there's not, then I will proceed as I instructed in my instructions here, and we would start with a presentation from the business license official for the county. And Mr. Brown, who'll be handling that for the county?
Mr. Chair, the business license official reference would be Ms. Pam Davis, and she is on the call, sir.
Ms. Davis, you may present the case on behalf of Richland County.
Thank you, Mr.
And my
Livingston.
colleagues, if it would help so that we won't interfere with the time allotted, if you can hold your questions after the presentation, unless it's something pertinent you need to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. I'll start by giving a very brief history, which is that on Wednesday, August 26th, the county administrator, Mr. Brown, and Sheriff Lott declared the business officially named Sujin Inc., doing business as My Place or Blaze, as a public nuisance, according to the county code section 18-7, public nuisances, with a determination of imminent danger to the public. On Friday, August 28th, I received notification of this determination based upon excessive public safety response, county code section 18-7B as in Bravo, subparagraph 5. Upon reviewing the Sheriff's Department's documentation, an affidavit by Major Harry Polis dated August 24th, 2020, which detailed the excessive public safety response provided the same day, I determined that the conditions set forth in the county code section 18-7B5 had been met, and that the business license for the business should be revoked pursuant to section 16-18I, subparagraph I. I provided this determination to revoke the license to the county administrator, Mr. Brown, later the same day on August 28th. Here to discuss the Sheriff's Department's documentation regarding this business is Chief Joanna McDuffie and Major Harry Polis.
Good afternoon, Chairman Livingston and members of council. My name is Harry Polis. I am a major with the Operations Division at the Richland County Sheriff's Department. One of my responsibilities in this role is to come before you today and lay the foundation for why the sheriff and the county administrator determined that My Place, also known as Club Blaze, is deemed to be an imminent danger to the public based on all the activity that's gone on at that location over the course of the last year. You'll bear with me just a minute. I've got a PowerPoint presentation I'm going to share with everybody here. Okay. My Place is located at 7720 Claudia Drive at the corner of Park Lane Road in unincorporated Richland County and Council District 3. To paint a picture for you, Claudia Drive and Park Lane Road are the intersection of residential area, which is predominantly Claudia Drive is residential, and Park Lane Road is predominantly commercial. The Richland County business licensee, his name is John McNeely, and the business license in question today is 2020-48051-470-341, and the county has determined that this location was to be licensed as a drinking place. Mr. McNeely in the photo is the actual licensee and the owner of the business. For the South Carolina Department of Revenue purposes, they are licensed as a nonprofit private club. They also have an on-premise beer and wine permit, and they are licensed. Also, the licensee is Mr. John McNeely. If you'll bear with me a little bit, I'm going to lay out the foundation as a timeline of events. It is lengthy. I'll go ahead and give you that warning, but I think it's important to establish in front of you all why we determined that this location is an imminent danger to the public. About several years ago, I was tasked, along with Chief McDuffie, with meeting with bar and nightclub owners throughout Richland County. We had learned over the course of time that there were a lot of locations that were having a high crime rate. There were lots of shootings, fights, all kinds of incidents that were going on at these locations. Prior to September of 2019, there were multiple incidents at my place, but for the purposes of this meeting, I'm going to lay out what has happened in the last year. On September the 17th, myself, along with Chief McDuffie, had a meeting at headquarters here at the Sheriff's Department. We met with Mr. McNeely, his manager, Jamil Carreras, and Mr. McNeely's ex-wife, Sue Jung. The goal for that meeting was to hear their concerns and work together to bring resolution to the issues that they were having at the location. The other goal of the meeting is to develop rapport with the owners of the business to ensure that they knew they could reach out to the Sheriff's Department if they were having any issues to seek our assistance. Not long after that meeting, starting on September the 22nd, that's when things continued to spiral out of control at the location. On August the 22nd at 2:29 a.m., our deputies were dispatched to a fight in progress. They arrived on scene and people were still being allowed to enter the bar. Our deputies at that time reported a strong odor of burning marijuana inside the establishment. Moving on to October the 6th at 2:56 a.m., we had a report of multiple physical and verbal altercations taking place at the establishment. The manager at the time refused to shut the bar down, claiming that the issues were all in the parking lots of the All South and the BP. This location sits right in front of All South Federal Credit Union and across the street from BP. So you're going to see that a lot of the issues are stemming around this location as people coming to and from those locations because they're using All South as a parking lot as well as BP back then. And they continue to use it up through the day that we closed it down. On October the 12th at 4:30 a.m., our deputies received a call for a fight in progress. There was a verbal altercation which began inside the bar and ended in a fight in the parking lot of All South involving fist fights and beer bottles. Also moving forward, October the 13th, the very next day, our agency received 3 emergency calls for service in one night from this location. The first came in at 1:11 in the morning. Shots fired were heard in the vicinity of the bar. At 3:30 in the morning, we had another fight in progress, reportedly involving a gun. The security officers at my place told our deputies that the fight had actually been in the BP parking lot and the suspects fled prior to our deputies' arrival. At 5:33 a.m. on the 13th, our deputies were dispatched to Providence Northeast to meet with a victim who was stabbed during the altercation at my place. So just that one night, we received 3 calls for service. After that, Chief McDuffie and Major Ash, he's the major of our uniform division, they were doing a compliance check on October the 18th, where they would go to bars and nightclubs throughout Richland County to ensure compliance with licensing and other regulatory issues. While they were there, Chief McDuffie spoke to Mr. Carreras, and Mr. Carreras told her that night that all the issues stemmed from the congregation of people who were hanging out in the parking lot of the barbecue grill with the BP gas station right across the street. Also that night, when Chief McDuffie and Major Ash arrived at the establishment, there were multiple people observed smoking marijuana openly in the parking lot in close proximity to the entrance of the business. And multiple citations were issued that night by deputies on scene. Also, as a result of that visit on the 18th, Chief McDuffie and I went to the BP and we met with the owners there, and they agreed to remove the barbecue grill and stop allowing patrons from my place to park on their property. We hoped at that time that would alleviate the issues that they were having. It did not. Unfortunately, the issues persisted even after the removal of the barbecue grill and the institution of them towing vehicles illegally parked on their property. Also on that day, we met with another business owner who is right close to the business, and they showed us bullet holes from one of the prior shootings that had gone through their business, an insurance agency right there at the corner of Claudia and Park Lane. Moving on to November 3rd at 4:37 a.m., we received calls about loud music and cars parked everywhere. On November the 16th at 2:40 a.m., we received another loud music and people loitering in the parking lot complaint. On the 23rd, we received 2 calls at 3:39 a.m., a loud music and a yelling citizens complaint, and we received the exact same call again at 5:03 in the morning. Those incidents, that was actually a continuation of one call on the 23rd. On November 30th at 2:06 a.m., Schroeder's Tow Service called the Sheriff's Department to have deputies stand by while they towed illegally parked vehicles off of the All South Federal Credit Union parking lot. At that time, the management of my place was irate with our deputies and caused a scene. That same night, we were called back to the location at 4:07 a.m. for a loud music and people complaint. Continuing on to December of 2019, December the 8th at 4:03 a.m. and at 4:30 a.m., we received loud music and loud people complaint. On the 4:03 a.m. call, as you can see, we were also told there were people arguing. Skipping ahead to February of 2020, February the 8th, at 2:42 a.m., there was a physical altercation inside the bar in which the caller stated that several people pulled guns out on each other. You'll see a trend here. There's a lot of incidents of shots fired and or gun calls. Anytime that we have something, usually there's the allegation of a gun being involved. March 15th of 2020 at 2:51 a.m., we received a shots fired call. A citizen stated that they had heard gunshots coming from my place. On March the 20th at 10:47 p.m., that was not long after the governor instituted the executive order forcing bars and nightclubs to close down due to COVID. I, along with Captain Gonzalez, we were out doing compliance checks that night, and we discovered that my place was open in violation of the governor's order. They were verbally warned and the establishment was closed. From March to June of 2020, all bars and nightclubs were closed pursuant to the governor's executive order. We're actually thankful for that in this instance because we know nobody got injured during that time frame. You'll see that when the bars closed, nobody's getting shot and there's not any calls coming in. On June the 27th at 4:18 a.m., end of June is about when the bars and nightclubs were allowed to open back up. 4:18 a.m. on the 27th, a victim was assaulted by an unknown suspect and transported to the hospital for for treatment by EMS. At 8:04 a.m., there was an assault and a robbery. A male reported that he was attacked and robbed by a group of 10 unknown suspects while walking back to his vehicle from my place. June of 2020, now on the 28th at 5 a.m., there was a female victim who was walking back to her vehicle from my place and was being harassed by an unknown male. Fearing for her life, she pulled out her .22 caliber pistol. Another unknown male took the gun from her and stole her jewelry, cash, and shoes. What's notable about this incident is that the female felt so unsafe by being at the location, she felt the need to take her own gun with her. July of 2020, on July the 4th, 4:45 a.m., large group of males that were fighting in the street at my place. On July the 5th at 3:08 a.m., we received a shots fired call. A victim called from a residence in close proximity on Claudia Drive to my place after reported hearing multiple gunshots coming from the location. 2 bullets went through the victim's bedroom window and lodged into the headboard of her bed. She was asleep at the time it happened. I've got a couple crime scene photos that I would like to share with you all so you can understand just how close we were to having a homicide that night. The first photo you'll see at the bedroom window of the victim, there's 2 bullet holes through the glass. Evidence markers A and B in this photo represent where the 2 bullets struck the victim's headboard. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is one of them. If you look, what you're looking at here is a photograph of my place through the bullet hole that our crime scene investigator took to establish some form of trajectory. There's no doubt that the bullets came from the direction of my place club. That night, we were fortunate. We were very fortunate we didn't have a citizen who was murdered that night.
Oh, wait a minute, that sound is the end of 15 minutes. So if you are to continue per our ordinance, it would have to be a motion and a vote of council to go beyond the 15 minutes. And if that's granted to you, it would have to be granted to the opposition.
Chairman Livingston, I'm nearly done, if that helps make your decision, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Is that the
I move to extend. Yes, Councilman Walker.
Yes, Mr. Walker, you recognize.
I move to extend the allowable time by 5 minutes for each party.
The motion is extended allowable time by 5 minutes to each party. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. And I also have a question.
That motion moving properly second. Question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we are allowing 5 extra minutes for the Sheriff's Department, will that also extend time for my place?
That was the motion. That's exactly
Okay.
what Mr. Walker stated.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening closely enough. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Manning. I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Mr. Manning, you recognize for substitute motion.
I move that we extend time for both parties 3 minutes.
The substitute motion to extend time for both parties 3 minutes. Is a second for the substitute motion. Substitute motion failed for lack of a second. The motion before us is to extend the time for 5 minutes for each party. Ms. Owen can call the roll for this motion.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
No.
Dickerson, McBride, Livingston,
Yes.
Ratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Manning,
No.
Myers, Newton. The motion passes.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. Between July 8th and 10th, I made multiple attempts after that shooting on July the 5th to contact Mr. McNeely to discuss the ongoing problems at his location. He was very difficult to get in touch with, but when he did finally reply to my email, he stated in his email that he had been voted out as president because of what was going on with the shootings. That's a direct quote out of his email to me. So even he acknowledged that there was a problem at the location. On July the 11th at 4:15 a.m., Schroeder's Tow Service was went to All South to tow the illegally parked vehicles that belonged to my place patrons. Several patrons got into a verbal dispute with the tow truck driver over the vehicles, and one suspect pulled a gun on the tow truck driver. August the 15th of 2020 at 12:15 a.m., SLED agents went to the location and inspected them, citing them for some alcohol violations. They also did the same thing on the previous day. There was another incident where SLED responded as well, but I skipped right over it. My apologies. August the 23rd at 1:23 in the morning, deputies in the area heard multiple gunshots coming from my place and observed people running from the location screaming. Management at my place were uncooperative with our investigation. They would basically not allow deputies in to search and make sure that everything was okay. Deputies at that time seized 2 firearms and narcotics from subjects who were leaving the bar. And in closing, I just want to make some real quick, point out a couple quick things to you. If you were following along in the timeline, you saw that all the times, most of the times were highlighted in yellow. This is important because as a private club, this is a members only location. They choose who comes to this establishment. This is not your neighborhood bar and grill where anybody can just walk in off the street. It's a private members only club. As of today, there are 14 private clubs in unincorporated Richland County. Four of those private clubs are within 2 miles of each other in the Decker Boulevard and Park Lane Road corridor. My place is the only private club that has had any criminal activity of those 4. I want to also point out there have been no shootings at my place or in the area of my place since it was shuttered. And we believe that this business presents an imminent danger to the public if it is allowed to continue to operate. That concludes my presentation, Council Chairman.
Thank you. Now, time for questions from my colleagues. Any questions from staff regarding this issue? If there are no questions, then I'll ask, I think, Mr. Rutherford, you on the line. I think you're going to present the case.
Yes, sir.
Wait, Mr. Chair, I apologize. I was not able to unmute. I did have a few questions.
I'm sorry, Miss. Hold 1 minute, Mr. Rutherford. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking at the memorandum that we have from the Sheriff's Department on page 5 of 40, it says that you responded to the location over 26 times in the last year, and that despite your efforts with the club ownership and management to take action with regards to criminal activity, that the situation wasn't made better. My question is, what are those steps specifically that you asked the club to take, and what was their response?
So during the meeting we make recommendations. There's certain things that we do at the Sheriff's Department. We offer security surveys where our CAT team will come out and look at the property and make recommendations on things they can do to improve security. We look at parking plans. We make sure, we try to help them establish a parking plan that's suitable for the location and the activity that's taking place there. We also make recommendations that they can hire private security, which I believe in this instance they did at some point hire private security as an option. Obviously, we also offer, they can call us anytime they have any issues. If something is going on, matter of fact, one of the recommendations I specifically tell our bar and nightclub owners, if they have something that happens at location, please reach out to us proactively so we can help them fix the problem and make sure that they're getting all the resources they need to ensure that their location does not become a haven for criminal activity.
So then, just to be clear, when you met with them, you told them that they could change their parking plans, they should get private security, and that they could also reach out to you with any problems. Those were the specific recommendations for.
So, we do make those recommendations. We also offered, and they did take us up on the security survey. We had a deputy go out and do a security survey on the business. Corporal Kim from our CAT team actually did it for them. And we also tell them there are options for security through SLED, through the Sheriff's Department, different ways that they can help mitigate problems moving forward.
Okay, and so then from your perspective, with the possible exception of having private security, they didn't take any of your recommendations to alleviate the problems at the club?
They're not curtailing illegal drug use. They're still allowing citizens with guns to come into the property and be present. Based sheerly on the numbers of people that are coming to the establishment, it's very hard to believe that they're actually operating lawfully as a private club and doing what they're supposed to be doing in that regard as well, ma'am.
Okay, and then just last question quickly. In terms of allowing patrons to come in with guns, is there like a gun detector? What is the mechanism by which they would know that someone was entering the premises with guns, or they would be allowing people to remain with guns?
Typically, when you hire a private security company, they'll do pat downs at the door, ma'am. And when they locate a gun, we have had other bars and nightclubs that have instituted this, and they will actually call the Sheriff's Department after they detain somebody at the door, and we'll make the arrest and take the gun and enter it into evidence on behalf of the private security company. So there are mechanisms in place that the businesses can use to ensure that guns and illegal narcotics are not coming in through their front door.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions, Mr. Rutherford, you may go now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the council. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. And let me adjust just a little bit, I'm sorry. And to address these allegations made against my clients. And just to go backwards, I will address what Major Polis said to Councilwoman Newton. The problem is that, as you can tell from the answers being given by the Sheriff's Department, they are seemingly answering the question, but in reality being very evasive. When they met with my clients instituted every single request that was made of them. They did look at the parking situation. They hired private security. They have both a metal detector and they do pat downs. And they also made a further request of the Sheriff's Department twice. They requested that they be allowed to have an off-duty sheriff's deputy that they would pay for to be able to be on the outside of the business. As you noted from Major Polis's conversation, most of these problems happened either at All South, at the BP station, or at the AM/PM mart. And if that's the BP station, I'm not sure. I'm just reading from the incident report. The bulk of these problems did not occur at the incident location. The reason why that is significant is because once they leave, once a patron leaves Club Blaze, they are no longer the liability of Club Blaze, and they cannot be. Club Blaze does not have the authority, and they cannot go to another person's business on another person's property and tell people where to park and what to do. They made a big deal out of the All South Bank parking lot, which is behind my client's location. They stated that when Schrader showed up to tow a car, that people pulled guns on him. And I don't know why they even mentioned that, because they made no relation to Club Blaze whatsoever. Nor did they mention that they'd arrested anyone, charged anyone, seized any guns, nor that they were even coming from the club in question or had guns on them when they left the club. In the latest incident, he said that they showed up at the incident location, and when they did, they were told by security that everything was fine. But then they charged 2 people who had guns and marijuana after leaving the club. Well, what effectively they're saying is that someplace else, not at Club Blaze, that they stopped people and found a gun and marijuana on them. Not an uncommon thing in Richland County, but has nothing to do with Club Blaze, and nor can he make that association. He listed several phone calls where they got calls for loud noise and arguing. What he did not list on the incident reports that we have in our packets that we were given, and I believe that you all were given the same packets that we have, is where those calls were actually coming from and what they were referring to. He told you that at some point the BP station had a barbecue grill across the street, which was the cause of so much concern that they shut that business down. Someone cooking barbecue at a gas station, they shut that business down and no longer allow people to park there. But yet problems continued to happen there because it's a BP station, it's a gas station on a very busy street, and it is not something that my client can control. He does not own the BP station or the AM/PM Mart, which was also the location of where the young lady said that she got robbed. She was at the AM/PM Mart. She was not at Club Blaze. My client is not responsible for anything that happens outside of Club Blaze. What is clear is that during the shutdown from March to June, my client did receive, or March to July, I believe, when the governor ordered nightclubs to be closed, SLED did come in and tell them that they were operating when they should not have been. And we all know that when the governor issued those executive orders, they didn't send letters out to all the clubs. They didn't send letters out to all those people that possess liquor licenses. They showed up, they issued a warning, and that's what happened in this location. And when they did, Club Blaze shut down. They did not continue to operate, flouting the law. The bulk of these calls were things that happened outside of Club Blaze. And I repeat that because if you look through every single incident report, you will find that someone was at the hospital and they said that while they were at Club Blaze, that something happened to them. The eyewitness says, I didn't see that. I was there. I didn't see that. But a lot was going on at the time. They can't even put what happened at Club Blaze. Most importantly, Major Polis showed you a window with a bullet hole in it. And if you look across the street, you could see Club Blaze. And I say that because if you look across Park Lane, you can see Club Blaze. Park Lane is a 4-lane road. What Major Polis did not tell you is who lives in that house, whether somebody was looking for them, shooting at them, or had anything to do with them. We don't know that because the sheriff's department simply did not investigate it. They'd rather blame it on Club Blaze. What we should be looking for, what we should take note of, are those things that happen on premises that the sheriff's department is there, they investigate, they have a witness that says it, they give that witness's name, and we are allowed to go and talk to that witness and verify what they're saying and put it on my client's premises. Other than that, everything that happens at that part of Decker Boulevard, that part of Park Lane cannot be blamed on Club Blaze because Club Blaze has no liability. They can't do anything to stop it. That is the responsibility of the sheriff's department. That is the reason why Club Blaze and its management and its owner requested from the sheriff's department that they be allowed to receive protection, that they would be willing to pay for so that they could make sure that things like this don't happen and that they get blamed for it. If we take a look and examine the top 10 businesses in Richland County that received the most calls from the Richland County Sheriff's Department, they are the Walmart store, 10136 Two Notch Road, not Club Blaze. 7201 Two Notch Road, which is Columbia Place Mall, not Club Blaze. 301 Percival Road, which is the Percival Grocery Store, not Club Blaze. 7128 Park Lane Road, the Magnuson Hotel, not Club Blaze. 321 Killian Road, the Walmart, not Club Blaze. 5831 North Main Street, the Obama gas station. And as the commentator said on Live PD, if you watch Live PD, you're familiar with the Obama gas station. The Obama gas station is not present in front of you all. It is Club Blaze, and I haven't gotten to Club Blaze yet, and I'm on number 6 in terms of locations. 2640 Broadway Road, the Rushes, not Club Blaze. 7541 Nates Road, the Motel 6, not Club Blaze. 1029 Briargate Circle, the Economy Hotel, not Club Blaze. The top 10 locations in Richland County that receive visits from the Sheriff's Department, not Club Blaze. And to allow the Sheriff's Department to jump down and find Club Blaze at some point, not in the top 10, but at some point to designate that they be closed is an arbitrary and capricious calculation, and that we allege, and we have, again, and I can back this up by years of dealing with this, is a concerted effort to leave minority businesses in the county unprotected to then be subject to shut down by nuisance. Every single business that I listed in the top 10 is not owned by a minority and was not subject for shutdown. The nuisance order that council elected to put in place has been in place for some time. None of these businesses have been served. None of these businesses have been shut down for nuisance, yet my client is the second minority-owned business that has been subject to shutdown. At some point, the citizens of Richland County, be they inside Club Blaze, be they in the surrounding neighborhood, deserve protection from the Sheriff's Department. And if that protection cannot be provided by the Sheriff's Department at the taxpayer's expense, it should be allowed to be provided at the expense of Club Blaze if they so choose. As we all know, Club Blaze cannot be expected to protect what happens at the BP. They're not responsible, nor can they be liable, and their insurance would not cover them if they went over there and tried to do something about anything going on at the BP station. It also would not cover them at the Out South parking lot. That is not covered under Club Blaze. What we have heard today is a listing of incidents, the bulk of which did not happen at Club Blaze. Those that did, the violations of the governor's executive order that happened at Club Blaze, the SLED cannot show, nor can the Sheriff's Department show that they received any notice whatsoever as to what they were supposed to do. And Major Polis mentioned between March and June, trying to, I guess, shed some lack of credibility on behalf of my clients, that between March and June, no shootings happened. But you all recall, between March and June, everything was shut down. That's when the governor shut down the entire state, so nobody was going anywhere. So it wasn't Club Blaze, people weren't leaving their house. Businesses were closing all over the place because there was no business to be had. So I'm not sure about where my time is, and I don't want to run over, but I will end at this point and accept any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Rutherford?
Mr. Chair, Bill Malinowski.
Mr. Malinowski, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Counselor, can you tell me, I don't believe I heard when Club Blaze made a request of the Sheriff's Department for this security, did they receive it? Or if not, what was the answer?
They have not received it. They made that request in September of 2019, when you heard Major Polis tell you that they sat down with the management. And Councilman Malinowski, I have represented several clubs, several restaurants that have made that same request of the Sheriff's Department, and all have been denied. And that is over the past 15 years. I've met with the solicitor's office about this very same issue. I have talked to sheriff's deputies, and in fact, one time was in the Sheriff's Department meeting with Investigator Eisenhower, who said that that was a great idea, that they be allowed to provide off-duty protection. And in fact, that was what they were talking about with the community partnership. And that request was denied of another location as well, even after Investigator Eisenhower said and believed that it could happen. And Councilman Malinowski, when you listen to the response that Major Polis gave to Councilwoman Newton, what you heard were a bunch of things that I could tell anybody. We'll check on your parking, make sure you have security. But Club Blaze goes over and above that. You can't get in Club Blaze if you are a male unless you are above the age of 30. You can't get in if you are a female unless you're above the age of 25. The two people that the Sheriff's Department cites as being caught with guns and drugs outside of Club Blaze were too young to even get in. So they were not participants. They were not at Club Blaze doing anything wrong because they would have been too young to get in. But the problem is with the inability to police any property outside of your own, all of that is the responsibility of the sheriff's department. And if put on Club Blaze, they're going to fail every time because they simply cannot do it.
Thank you, Counselor, for that answer.
Mr. Ratio, and then Ms. Newton.
Thank you. Mr. Rutherford, could you give us a little bit of information about the nature of this membership? And is it one of those things where I could walk up on an evening and buy a membership right there? Or is this something that is a little more restrictive and monitored than that?
It is restrictive, but not so restrictive as to you would have to, it's not like a country club where you may be on the membership list for years. You can come up and apply for a membership to get in on site, but you do have to give your ID. They know who people are, and they're only going to let those people in that they have identified as being members or guests of members. And it was in an effort to make sure that they did not have problems. No business can succeed by having problems, and problems, especially whether they're going to be shut down as a nuisance or not. Nobody wants to come if the business is not doing what they're supposed to do. That is the reason for the age requirement. That is the reason for the private membership. And that is further the reason for the security being in line with a metal detector, as well as pat downs coming through the door to try and do everything they can to not have any problems.
Thank you. And I just have another question, not specifically related to that one, but when you say that the request was denied to hire some off-duty officers, was there a reason given for that?
No, ma'am. And nor has any reason been given in the past. I've understood it that the sheriff did not want his deputies working at places that sell alcohol, but in the conversation with Chief Johnson before he became solicitor, he understood, and everyone understands, that a private business owner cannot police the business next door. We don't allow that. The only people that can do that are the Richland County Sheriff's Department. And as the Richland County Sheriff's Department has gone through and listed any of the problems, and they list day to day to day problems that surround that location with phone calls about loud noise or arguing, what you did not hear was that there was a deputy on site. What you did not hear was there was a deputy at the gas station, or a deputy at the All South parking lot, or a deputy across the street. What you did not hear was that when I was out at Club Blaze on Friday afternoon, there was law enforcement activity investigating something that had happened across the street. What you did not hear was that several days ago, there was a call of shots fired, 14 shots fired, and Club Blaze was closed. This is a busy part of the county. It also abuts one of the number 3 location on the Sheriff's Department's list of top 10 locations, which is the Columbia Place Mall. And so it is right there where there's a lot of activity. And yet not one single time did you hear that a deputy was right there and that what they were doing was making sure that people were okay in that location.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
I have Ms. Newton and then Ms. McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also, I don't know if our process would allow us to also ask these questions of the Richland County Sheriff's Department, but some of my questions also apply. So my first question is, you listed the top 10 places of incidents where Richland County sheriffs respond. My question to you is, are you comparing apples to apples? So in terms of the similar types of complaints, whether it's gunfire or harassment or assault, are those the same types of complaints at those top 10 locations, or do they just get more calls because there was a parking accident in the garage or something like that?
So it's difficult for us to tell because we can only get this information from the Sheriff's Department as they're willing to give it. When we made the request of the Sheriff's Department for the top 10 calls, we also made the request for them to tell us what the locations were. They refused. They said they didn't know because businesses changed names. So we had to Google this information to figure out what they were ourselves because they wouldn't tell us. But what I can tell you is that if you skip down to what I believe is number 7, the 5831 North Main Street, the Obama gas station, I know from being a criminal defense lawyer that they get everything at the Obama gas station, everything at the Obama gas station. That's why it's one of the things that I noted that on Live PD, they say if you watch Live PD, you're familiar with the Obama gas station. It's number 7 on the list. Again, my clients are nowhere near there. And again, as a criminal defense lawyer, I can tell you the Motel 6, the Economy Hotel, drug charges, you're going to have assaults, you're going to have criminal sexual conduct, things that are a lot more egregious than what my client would even
And Ms. Newton, to respond to your question, yes, if the county wishes to respond to anything any council member would ask at this time, they certainly have the right to do so too. Then I have, Ms. Newton, you finished?
Oh, sorry, no, I just have one more question, which I would also have for the police.
You still have the floor.
You mentioned that there weren't altercations inside, and unfortunately, I can't find, I could have sworn that there was a place in my report that listed numerous altercations that did actually happen inside the premises. And so are you saying that no incidents happened on premises at all, or that after you instituted changes like metal detectors, et cetera, that those altercations ceased?
There was one altercation that can be documented that actually happened inside. And that was a gentleman that was assaulted after he was asked to leave. Security.
Okay.
That's okay. Security made the request that he leave the premises. On his way out the door, he sexually assaulted a young woman. He grabbed her on her behind, and a gentleman came and hit him in his eye, and he was the one that was assaulted in the club. And so he was already asked to leave. Security was escorting him out, and that assault did happen inside the club. And rather than write up the assault on the young lady as being something that then caused the assault on him, it's written up in here as an assault on that individual. That did happen inside. The other ones were if a witness said, oh, by the way, I was in Club Blaze and this happened to this young lady. I was with her. I didn't see it, but that's where we were. That's what they wrote down. But in terms of actual incidents inside the location, it was the assault on that guy that also assaulted a female on his way out of the club.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have Ms. McBride and then Mr. Walker. Ms. McBride, you recognize?
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Council Rutherford, thank you for providing me with some information that I was not aware of, and I do concur with you regarding the Obama gas station because it is also a part of my District 3. And we're trying to find a way to address that problem, and I look forward to it being addressed real soon. But getting back to, you call it Club Blaze, is that the correct name?
Is that the correct name? Yes, that's the correct name.
Okay, because was it known as My House?
My Place.
My Place is known as My Place? Okay, thank you. My concern is that as the council person for that district, I received numerous complaints from constituents regarding it. And they see it as a blight area in that community. And they've called about the loud music, they've called about gunshots. So I'm coming from the perspective that my community does not see this place as an asset to the community. In fact, it's a blighted spot in our community. So, and I don't know the relevance to this particular case right now, but I know that those are the concerns of some of the community members. Also, I'm concerned about the minority businesses because I definitely support minority businesses, and I don't want to target them unjustly. But this has been a problem based on the community's perception. And is the current owner a minority? Is he African American, or is he a person of color? The current
owner of the actual business is not a minority, but it is a minority business. It's a business that caters to minorities. Okay, so the owner is not a minority. Thank you. I'm just concerned about the complaints coming from the community. That is an old established community where we have people worked hard to purchase homes in that area, and most of them, we have a number of senior citizens. So those are the concerns and complaints that I get from the constituents. And thank you so much, Councilwoman McBride, for bringing that to my attention. And that is one of the things that I would like to address. And it is for any constituent of yours and every other council member, including myself, not as a council member, but my constituents, that would ask if you're going to have a location that's going to involve density, a population density like at the fair, when people go to the fair, and if the sheriff's department were to list the number of incidents at the fair, you'd have everything from shootings to fights to gang activity. But they don't shut it down because they patrol the fair. They sell alcohol at the fair, but the sheriff's department patrols the fair. But what you have when you go further out are businesses in particular that cater to minorities and minority-owned businesses that lack that same protection. And what that does is put your constituents, other council members' constituents in jeopardy, because if people are driving by, if young people are going, hey, there are people in there, I'm going to stop, then they can't get in because they're too young. And Club Blaze says you have to leave, and they go to the gas station and they cause trouble. There's nothing that Club Blaze can do about that.
All right.
They
And
leave. I'm sorry.
Mr. Reverend, I'm going to limit your responses to
Yes, sir. Yes,
the
sir.
answer to the question, so we won't have to go on too long. All right.
That's my councilman. Yes, sir.
Ms. McBride, are you there?
Yes, I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Walker, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councilor Rutherford, for presenting on behalf of your client. My concern lies in that there have been some pretty serious, from my perspective, allegations leveled at our sheriff's department by Representative Rutherford, and I think it would be remiss not to allow Major Paulus or whomever from the sheriff's department feels appropriate to respond specifically to the allegations that there were in fact requests made for on-site security, for enhanced patrols, the various allegations that have been leveled against them. I would appreciate giving the floor to the appropriate representative from the sheriff's department to address those.
And I agree with you, and I'd certainly offer that, yes.
Councilman Walker, thank you for the opportunity to respond to that. That's categorically untrue. In September, we met with Mr. McNeely and his team. As I stated, prior to leaving that meeting, Mr. McNeely was provided information on what he needed to do to request extra duty officers from the sheriff's department to work at his establishment. Back in September, that request, we never received a request from Mr. McNeely or Mr. Carreras about extra duty officers. Additionally, in an email as recently as July the 14th, Mr. McNeely, please email Captain Flowers, who is now our extra duty coordinator, and tell her what you need. I provided her email address. That was July 14th, a month before we felt like we had to take this extreme remedy of closing the business down in the interest of public safety. So that's just simply not true. Thank you for the opportunity to respond.
And Chairman, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
Major Polis told my client himself that no officers were available. And this is not the first time. In fact, I'm looking at Mika Cedar, which was shut down as a public nuisance. They made the request with me sitting there for off-duty sheriff's deputies. I'm also familiar with Candyland that also made the request for off-duty sheriff's deputies from Investigator Eisenhower, and they were told no. So again, this has been an ongoing thing and ongoing denials from the sheriff's department. But what I would ask, and this is the perfect opportunity, if my clients can be permitted to continue to operate, they will pay for off-duty sheriff's department deputies to come in and police the other parking lots, not inside the club, but outside the parking lots where all the problems seem to be stemming from. We can cure this right now if the sheriff's department is willing to put their money where their mouth is and provide off-duty sheriff's deputies.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, your hands up. You have you don't speak again?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I forgot to take it down.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Nick, you're right now.
just a really quick question that's also a repeat of the question that I asked to Mr. Rutherford in terms of the top 10 locations where you're also receiving other calls that were listed. Are those calls that you're receiving, and you may not have the stats, but generally comparable in terms of the level of severity? And then also, if you could respond briefly to the number of altercations that appear to be happening outside and off club premises versus inside club premises. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. The information that was provided to Mr. Rutherford, the statistics that he's referring to were from 2018 to present. That's well outside what this ordinance allows us to look at. Could you repeat the first part of that question again, ma'am?
If you don't think that they're comparable timeframes, then I will just withdraw that question. And then my second question was about the incidents that appear to be occurring on premises or inside the club versus outside the club.
Sure. Back to your first question, the incidents are not comparable at department stores versus what's going on at this bar. So I think that's what you were getting at with your first question. To your second question, here's what we do know. We know that the citizens that patronize my place are coming to an establishment that creates an environment where they're comfortable to bring narcotics, guns, and generally violate the law. Whether they're traveling from the parking lot to the establishment or from the establishment to the parking lot, I think is irrelevant. However, we know that if my place weren't operating, we would not be having the level of or frequency of violence that we're experiencing at that establishment. I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Thank you.
And Chairman,
Mr. Livingston?
Chairman Livingston.
Hold 1 minute, Ms. Myers. Is that you, Ms. Myers?
Yes, sir. Let me just say, I've been on the line since 3:02, but for whatever reason, I guess I was on the muted line. And I would like to be as attending the meeting. And I do have several questions if I can ask them.
Breaking up a
Mr.
little bit,
Russell
Ms. Myers.
and Captain Polis. Am I recognized, sir?
Yes, you recognize. I'll just let you know you're breaking up a little bit. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you better now.
Okay, so just Mr. Only, please record me as present. I've been here for the entire meeting, but couldn't get through. Mr. Polis, you said that it is categorically untrue that you all would not provide assistance for this club, and this is the only one before us. So I know that Mr. Rutherford brought those up, but they're not before us. Can you please tell me?
Ms. Myers.
I apologize. I can't hear anything she's asking when she got to the question.
She's going out. Ms. Myers, we lost you. Ms. Myers, we cannot hear you. I apologize too.
Hello?
Yes, we couldn't hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So, Mr. Polis, you said that it's categorically untrue that the Sheriff's Department doesn't provide this service to businesses like this one that's before us. Me, Casita, and the others that Mr. Rutherford referenced aren't before us. So can you just tell me what kinds of materials the Sheriff's Department provides to these businesses? Is there a fee schedule? Are there some collaterals that you give these businesses so that they know that these services are available? How do they know and how do they access them?
Ma'am, the fees for extra duty is set by county ordinance.
That's a different answer than my question. My question is, for businesses like Mr. Rutherford's clients, is there any piece of paper that you give them that instructs them on how they access those services and what they need to do, what kind of business they need to be to get the services provided to them, who they speak to, when and where they pay? What information do you give them so that they're on notice that this is available?
Yes, ma'am. We have an extra duty request form that we provide. It details what they're requesting and what we're able to provide at the time they request the service. So there is an information packet that they are given to apply for our deputies to work extra duty.
Right, but that presupposes that they are in your presence and applying. I'm asking how they know, how a business like Mr. Rutherford's clients would know that this is a service you all provide for them. What collaterals or any information is there that the Sheriff's Department provides that says, look, if you got trouble, let us help you. Here's what we can do. Is there anything like that, or do they have to know to come, and do they have to get the right person on the right day, as Mr. Rutherford is suggesting? I'm trying to find out what the generic information is that's provided to everybody.
All right. Well, first, I did tell this business, first of all, but second of all, that information is also available on our department website. We have a lot of businesses that request extra duty, and the information is readily available on the department's website.
Okay, so if Mr. Rutherford says that his client asked for it and you all said you would not provide it, he is not telling the truth.
Ma'am, at no time did we deny. At no time did we. There's feedback. I don't know. Okay. At no time did we deny a request for my place or Club Blaze to work extra duty. And as I said,
Okay.
as recently as
Okay.
July 14th, I reminded Mr. McNeely in an email how he could go about requesting us to work extra duty at that location. Also,
Okay.
the Sheriff's Department for over 2 years has provided this service at other bars and nightclubs. Years ago, there was a policy that this agency had that we would not work at bars or nightclubs. That has changed. That is no longer the case. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so the policy changed some years ago, you said?
I don't know the exact amount of time the policy changed, ma'am, but it was several years ago. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so do you think that the addition of off-duty officers at this particular establishment would make a difference?
At this point, no, ma'am. This business has demonstrated they've had multiple opportunities to request that service before we got to this point. So unfortunately, my answer to your question, ma'am, is no. I don't think extra duty officer at this location is going to make any difference at this point.
Mr. Rutherford, do you?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. And I will present to council and expect an apology from the Sheriff's Department, an email to a Captain Rachel Flowers from Sonia Harris in regards to Club Blaze, telling Ms. Sonia Harris, I was referred to you by Major Polis as a point of contact for setting up weekend police presence. I would like to have someone on Friday and Saturday nights from hours of 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. starting this weekend would be great. The address is 7720 Claudia Drive, Columbia, South Carolina, 29223, Blaze Bar and Grill. Your assistance is greatly appreciated. And they were told that there were none available. And I'm reading this email and I will send it on to council.
What date is that, Mr. Rutherford?
This was on July 16th, 2020, because they were told that although they had made the request before and were told that there were no officers, that because of the shutdown, things had slowed down and there were probably officers available. And so they made the request again, this time in writing via email, and were told that there were no officers available.
Mr. Rutherford, you didn't answer my first question. Do you think that the addition of off-duty officers would make a difference?
I do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just please mark me as present for the whole meeting.
You're quite welcome. If there's no other questions, let me just, per our ordinance, just talk about the decision that may take form as a result of this particular hearing. We may approve the licensed official of the county action, reference this particular business to shut it down. We may overrule that action, or we may make any other appropriate disposition council may make pursuant to this particular ordinance. But I have a couple of questions I want to ask if legal is still on the line regarding other appropriate disposition. If council chose to, let me just throw some things out. Let's say, can council suspend the license for a period of time? Can council do probation on conditions? Can council do those kind of things? Legal. Anyone online from council?
Mr. Livingston?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the ordinance gives the council the flexibility to fashion whatever remedy they think is appropriate based on the facts of the case. I don't think you just limit it to either closing it down, either upholding what the licensing official has recommended or not. I think the language of the ordinance says any other disposition you think the council as a body thinks is appropriate.
Thank you. So now we're at the point now where if council is ready to make a decision, and Mr. Smith, that decision needs, the orders require that decision to be made now or the future date, or how soon?
Mr. Livingston, this is just like any other decision that the council has to make. If the council believes that they are ready at this point in time to make a decision relating to this, then a motion to that effect may be in order. However, if for some reason the council is not prepared to do that, then obviously any decision regarding that or any motion or any action regarding this may be deferred until another time. That's within the discretion of council.
Thank you. Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Mr. Chair, my community is not here to hear or to give input on this hearing. And I know this is for council, but I just think about it. If would any of you want this type business in your community and providing whether it's in the place or around the place, providing the disruption to the community that these senior citizens and other residents are having to tolerate within that community, District 3's community. I'm really concerned because of my constituents are not here to voice their opinion, and I have to be their voice for them. And I just think, do you want this type of business in your community next door to you? So when we make our deliberations, we need to think about the conditions that the citizens are living under based on being in close proximity to this business.
Anyone else? Is there a motion from council members?
Mr. Chair, can I ask
You recognize,
Ms. McBride a
Ms.
question?
Mike, you recognize.
Thank you. Ms. McBride, thank you. Do you think that the addition of police officers to quell some of these concerns would make a difference, or do you not think so?
Based on what my constituents have talked to me about, they do not want the business there. It has not been nothing but problems. And I will have to go along with them.
So I hear you, and that I do understand. I have some heartburn about that, just because if the business is legally operating in the place where it is, I don't know. I think it's out. I'm concerned that we not get into. I just don't want to usurp their rights. I'm a little bit nervous about making a decision on that basis alone, just because that would mean then that we'd have put them out of business when they're legally operating. And so this is a difficult question, and this is the first test of our ordinance. I think that there are issues in our ordinance that need certainly more work, and I think that there's lots that we need to know from the sheriff's department. This particular case causes me a lot of heartburn. So I hear you, Ms. McBride. Thank you.
And Ms. Myers, if you note that in my first comments, I preference whether it was legally correct based on the ordinance and based on the rules. And I definitely am not for closing down or any business illegally, but these are concerns regarding what appears to be a nuisance. Now, the legalities of it and those other issues, then I have to leave that to our legal officials to determine whether we are following those procedures.
Ms. Teresa, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've mentioned a couple of remedies. One is, of course, to have the extra duty deputies on premises during operating hours. There was another mention of perhaps there being a period of time for them to be closed. I would assume that this would be to make some improvements in the business. Is there, I guess I would ask my colleagues, is there any, or maybe I should ask the Sheriff's Department, is there any, do you see any benefit to doing something like that?
I apologize, ma'am. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What I'm wondering is if, you know, I think we're all a little bit, we're weighing this decision very seriously, and trying to figure out what the best remedy would be. So, you know, one remedy would of course be to have extra duty deputies on the premises. The other we talked about, or that was mentioned, was perhaps it being closed for a period of time. I'm assuming that would be to make some improvements. Is that something that would be helpful? And I don't even know if you're the best person to answer this, but I would appreciate any insight you may have.
Sure. So extra duty is just that for our agency. It's an optional service that our deputies sign up for. We do not mandate that deputies work extra duty. So typically we can make that service available, and deputies who are off duty and want to pick up that extra detail are able to do so. So basically, like, what I'm saying is extra duty is not a guarantee thing that we can do, number one. I feel though, ma'am, and I believe this agency has tried everything we know to try for a year to try to get these people to operate their business lawfully. I think we are beyond anything other than revocation of the license. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer.
I have Ms. Newton, Mr. Manning, and Ms. McBride. And at any point, I'll entertain a motion to you. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess my comment would be for my colleagues, where this this troubles me greatly on several fronts. So on the one hand, we have an establishment where there's clearly an uptick of crime that is happening in its vicinity, and that is certainly not something that I want to encourage or perpetuate in Richland County. And I don't think it's an establishment that I will be visiting based on the type of history that it's having. At the same time, we are in a situation where we're looking at shutting down a business forever, and there's no other remedy. And I guess for me, what's troubling me is, while I certainly don't want the crime to continue, I guess I'm wondering if the only remedy is shutting the business down. And what I would be inclined to look at is, you know, do we have an option, or would the council consider, I have no idea because it's not in the ordinance, whether it's a 3-month probationary period or whatever the time period is, where now that I'm sure that we have the attention of this business owner, I can't speak to whatever disputes happened in the past, we have an opportunity where the parties could try again in good faith to come together to resolve this so that it's better for the citizens. And then if at that point those remedies do not in fact work, then we're at the permanent stage. It just feels to me that there may have been, I have no idea whether they're some miscommunications or some misfires, but I guess I would like to see, is there an additional opportunity for remedy? Again, I'm throwing out a probationary period. I have no idea what the appropriate time frame would be. Is it 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever the case may be? And then should that fail, that we then revoke the license. So that would be something that I would put out for consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
May I ask Ms. Newton a point of clarification, Mr. Chair?
We have a quick clarification.
Ms. Newton, would that also include community discussions and involvement with the community and sort of drafting how we go forward, or is it just the Sheriff's Department and the business?
I think community involvement would be great, and I'm certainly open to that. I don't know what the best solution is, but it just seems to me that there might be an opportunity for there to be a coming together. So if there is a willingness on the part of the community, I mean, this is clearly a problem for them that's affecting their lives. So I think that's reasonable. Thank you.
Ms. McBride and Ms. Manning.
Mr. Paulus, can you tell me, how long have we been dealing with this issue, with the problems from, and anybody that lives in District 3 or anybody in that surrounding community knows my place. And they know the problems that they've had at my place. This is where these people live, it's in our community. And fortunately, you all don't live in that community, so you're not aware of the issues that they deal with every day. And I just think we cannot move forward without taking into consideration, and I understand the legal issues, but the nuisance that is being provided, that is being caused by this business.
Councilwoman McBride, I believe your question was how far back have we gone and that we were having trouble with my place, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Okay, as far back that I can tell, as February of 2019 is when we saw a significant increase in the amount of criminal activity at the location. It's persisted through the day that we shuttered the business.
But prior to 2019.
I'd have to go back and look, ma'am. I don't have that information in front of me, but I'd also like to add to that point. In the last year, this business has had multiple opportunities to take it upon themselves to reach out to community members and assure them that they want to be good neighbors. And to my knowledge, that's never happened. So I'm not sure how that's going to change after today or could change after today, but it hasn't happened as of today, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
No, not right now, but let me let the council members, then
Okay.
I'll give up. Ms. Manning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I hear what Councilwoman McBride's saying, and I hear what Councilwoman Newton's saying. And as Councilor Rutherford indicated, this is the second case. The first case was in District 8. And I know one thing that was very different in that case was that the business was pretty isolated. You know, there weren't other businesses on the corner, beside it, across the street. So I'm a little concerned as I'm hearing here, clearly this area, because we heard about 3 businesses and a parking lot of another. And I'm guessing that one of the top 10, which I think is the Renaissance Plan Columbia Place Mall, the county, is just, you know, like behind here, but I don't think it's connected to what's happening here in this, although I'm not sure. But if there, I guess I'm being inclined toward if there's an option for some type of probation to look at involving the community. Obviously, the sheriff's department cannot be told that they have to provide off-duty officers. I'm just not feeling totally comfortable that in isolation, that this business in and of itself is the entire nuisance of that area. And I would be favorable towards some type of short-term probational licensure for us to try to figure that out if there's a way to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Malinowski, and I said at any point, I certainly entertain a motion. Mr. Malinowski, you recognize? Mr. Malinowski? Mr. Malinowski, did you want to be recognized? Obviously not. So I saw his hand up. If any further questions, did the motion come before the body?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Teresa, you recognize?
Thank you. I'm hearing this, talk about a probationary period. I think that if council were to move forward with something like that, we would definitely need to spell out what kinds of improvements or what we would like to see at the end of that probationary period, I believe, rather than just have doors closed for a certain amount of time and then open back up and it's exactly the same. Thank you. And I would defer to maybe, the sheriff's department and Ms. McBride and the community to see what kinds of suggestions that there might be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski, you ready now?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I guess we had some computer problem here. Anyway, I'm in agreement with Councilman Manning's comments there, but I'd also like to know, Major Polis says that since February of 19, there's been an increase in criminal activity. But what I'm hearing from Councilor Rutherford is that the activities that have been reported to and by the Sheriff's Department did not take place on the property of the business in question. That being the case, I would like to know from Major Polis how many incidents that the Sheriff's Department responded to can be directly attributed to the business in question. That is, that they took place on the property or in the establishment. Did you get that?
Mr. Polis, you want to respond to that?
Sorry, I was struggling with my video button. All of the activity at my place it all comes back to my place. Patrons visiting the property, leaving the property, on the property, around the property. They're not visiting the insurance company. They're not visiting the bank. They're using the BP, or at least they were using the BP to illegally park and congregate and go to and from my place. All of it comes back to my place. Thank you, sir.
I don't know. It seems to me that's a very big assumption because you don't have the activity. You have not found these people doing the illegal activity at or in the business.
Sir, I would respectfully disagree with you on the point of the fact that when this business is closed, we're not having the issues. Thank you.
I'll reserve any other comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, it's Jim Manning.
Mr. Manning?
Councilor Rutherford at one point asked if he could respond to something, and there were.
Yeah, I'm to let him do that. I also make sure the council member was finished.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't forget about that. Thank you. Mr. Rutherford, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Livingston. In response to Councilman Malinowski, that's exactly the point. You were told by Major Polis that they had to tell the barbecue grill that was operating at the BP station to stop operating. And they told the BP station to stop allowing people to park there because they were causing a problem themselves. The reason why they can report an uptick going back to January 2019 is because the Sheriff's Department started shutting down other Black establishments in that area. And this one was the only one open. Because they cater to an older crowd, they're not letting people in. And because they're not letting people in that are A, not members, and B, not old enough, you have people on the outside that may be causing problems. And so we do believe, and don't know why the Sheriff's Department doesn't believe, that continued operation under suspension with a Sheriff's Department officer that is off duty but on duty at Club Blaze during that suspension period would cut down all of the problems that we're talking about here. The presence of the Richland County Sheriff's Department means something. It should mean something. I believe it means something. And mandating that during the suspension period, we believe would make a huge difference to everyone's constituents, but especially Councilwoman McBride's.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Mann, you recognize.
Thanks, sir. So we're talking about off-duty sheriff can that also be off-duty City of Columbia, City of Forest Acres, Kershaw County, Fairfield County, SLED, or is the law such that off-duty officer assignment like this is only the availability of the jurisdiction?
In response to Councilman Manning, the City of Columbia allows their officers to work off duty at any place that is calling for them. But they cannot come into the county because this establishment is in the county. CPD officers could not come there. They wouldn't be allowed by their insurance company to do so. It would have to be staffed by the Richland County Sheriff's Department unless they had an agreement with somebody else that would allow their officers to operate in Richland County.
Okay, thank you for that answer. That's important clarification for me.
Thank you.
Comments again, is there a motion?
Mr. Livingston?
Mr. Myers, you recognize.
Just a quick question. Mr. Polis, are you saying, Mr. Rutherford just said that he thinks that the presence of the Richland County Sheriff's Department would make a difference, should make a difference, does make a difference. You said earlier that you didn't think that it would make a difference in this case. Can you elaborate on why you said that? And has any of this discussion changed your opinion on that?
Well, ma'am, I'm struggling slightly to hear what you're saying, but I think I got the gist of your question. And you were asking why I made the comment earlier that we didn't think extra duty officers would work at this location moving forward. Is that paraphrasing your question correctly, ma'am?
You said it wouldn't make a difference. Yes, I'd like to know why.
So if you recall earlier, Mr. Rutherford also said that deputies wouldn't be allowed inside the business. He made that distinction. And I think that's notable. Why wouldn't you allow your deputies, if you want them to work extra duty there, why would you not allow them in the business? And Mr. Rutherford said specifically, they would be allowed to work in the parking lots and the adjacent parking lots, but they would not be allowed in the business. So if we were starting off on that foot where there's this already, why wouldn't you want the deputies to come inside? Any other business we work extra duty at, they invite the deputies in. And matter of fact, that is the service they're paying for, is to have the deputies there. So I'm not real sure why Mr. Rutherford felt the need to say deputies would not be allowed inside this business. But I could reasonably make the assumption that there's other things going on inside that they don't want the Sheriff's Department to know about. Thank you.
If I could respond, Mr. Chairman.
You can.
Mr. Rutherford, before you respond, let me just follow up real quick.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Okay, even assuming that he said that, do you not think having them outside would make a difference?
Ma'am, I think in any business where you have deputies present, it's going to be a deterrent.
You can go ahead, Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you. And in response to what Major Polis was accusing me of, I was speaking on the sheriff's previous policy of not allowing his deputies to work places that served alcohol, and stating that if that was still a problem, that they did not have to work inside. We would welcome them to be inside. This is a place that wants to follow the rules, and like any other business, not only has liability to this council and to its constituency, but also has civil liability. We welcome deputies to be inside that location, making sure that everything is okay. That's what we are requesting. And thanks to Major Polis, maybe now we can get that.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. McBride, you recognize.
a procedural question. If we deny the appeal of the business license revocation, what happens? Will they be able to come back at another time? What is the next step?
That's a legal question. Mr. Smith, did you hear that? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was trying to I think her question was, what happens if the council upholds the revocation of the license? Was that the
Yeah.
question?
Mhm.
Well, if the council upholds the revocation of the license, then at that point, the business would not be in a position to operate legally because it would not have a license to operate.
Well, could they come back in another year or at a different time to reapply?
I am not certain about the answer to that question, Ms. McBride. I don't think that there's a provision under this ordinance that allows that, but I would defer that question to Ms. Davis, who is the Business Service Center Director.
Ms. Davis, do you have an answer to that question? Ms. Davis, can you hear us?
Mr. Chair, I see her name on
She's
the,
still on the line.
I don't see.
Ms. Davis, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I can. Can you hear me now?
Yes, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. The business license ordinance prohibits a drinking place, meaning a bar or lounge or a nightclub that has had a business license revoked from applying to be a nightclub or a drinking place for 3 years. So if the owner of a nightclub wants to open a shoe store, for example, the next year, they can do that. But any bar that has had a business license revoked cannot apply for a license as a bar for 3 years.
Thank you.
You got that, Ms. McBride?
Mhm.
Ms. McBride, you see on the floor, are you through?
Yes,
Mr. Manning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you say at the beginning that we did have that we're allowed to go into executive session for legal advice from our county attorney?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move we go into executive session.
Second.
It's been moving properly second, go to executive session. Ms. Only can call the roll for going to executive session.
Yes, sir. Malinowski. McBride.
yes.
Malinowski, yes.
Got you. Livingston.
No.
Horatio.
Yes.
Walker.
No.
Manning.
Yes.
Myers.
No.
Newton.
No.
It's a tie, it fails.
Thank you. Is there any other motions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to support the recommendation of the Sheriff's Department and our Business Licensing Division and uphold the revocation of said business license.
I second.
It's been moved and properly second. Discussion? Mr. Manning, you recognize?
I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
We still got discussion?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Chair.
Mr. Ratio, you recognize?
Thank you. So if this motion were to pass, the consequence would be that for 3 years, they could not apply to be a bar again, but they could be something else. So if that business were to be, say, a restaurant, that that could be a possibility for these folks. I guess this is for our business department.
Mr. Livingston, if I may be recognized?
Yes, you're recognized.
That is correct. They could not operate as a bar. They could apply to be a restaurant, but there would need to be some care taken to ensure through the zoning division, the building inspection division, and the fire marshal that the business is structured physically in such a way to operate as a restaurant instead of a bar.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I have Ms. Myers and then Mr. Malinowski.
Did you say Myers?
Myers, yes.
I just wanted some clarity on what for Ms. McBride, whether or not something like a 60 or 90-day trial period where they have the opportunity to work with the community to come up with some regulations and rules and put them in place, and with the sheriff's department, would be of any interest rather than just shutting them down permanently.
You want a response from Ms. McBride? What you asking?
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
What was the question? I couldn't hear you clearly.
Would there be any way that you would be willing to work with them to come up with some rules and guidelines around which they could work? And obviously, community involvement, maybe having a 60 or 90-day period where you all could sit down and then come back to the body to see if there was some way to not shutter the business for 3 years.
Ms. Myers, I'm going to speak based on the input from the community, and my response would be no.
Thank you.
Mr. Malinowski, you still need to speak?
Yes, sir, Mr.
And
Chair.
then Ms. Newton, and then Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Davis, this question is for you. If the business opens up as a restaurant, would they be able to sell alcoholic beverages and all the other amenities afforded a restaurant?
That would be more of a question for zoning, perhaps. While the Department of Revenue might allow them to have an alcohol license, as I indicated before, zoning and the other divisions would need to take great care that the business is physically structured in such a way as to operate as a restaurant and not as a bar. But alcohol could conceivably be sold, but again, with caution relating to the structure of the business itself.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Ms. Newton, then Livingston. Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Sorry, I thought that I was unmuted. I'm really struggling with this issue, and now I regret voting no on going into executive session, not just so much for this particular case, but in terms of the ordinance that I think that we have before us. And with this being our first test case, I really feel that some of the challenges of the ordinance and some things that we might want to tweak are before us. So I am clear that there has been an increase in crime and criminal activity in this area. I sympathize with the residents who are there, and as much as it's bothering me to sit here in this seat and talk about it, I can't imagine what it feels like to have my home be there that I've worked hard for. since this is such an extraordinary measure, it's a truly extraordinary measure. And I won't say that it's irrevocable, because theoretically you could come back in 3 years, but in reality, with the way businesses work, I think that we would be shuttering a business forever, where, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but there seems like there's an opportunity where we could bring some people together and see, you know, is there additional action that we can take, and whether off-duty police officers are the magical remedy here or not, I'm not sure, but I guess that's what I would like to see. And so with that in mind, I can wait until you speak, Mr. Chair. I don't want to cut you off, but I would offer a substitute motion.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question, parliamentary procedure?
Yes.
So Councilwoman Newton was on the prevailing side. I believe she could, if she so desired, make a motion to reconsider the vote about going into executive session.
That is the case. I have Livingston, and then anyone else who wants to speak. I want to make a substitute motion. And that substitute motion would be that the business would remain suspended through November 30th. And during that particular time, council will work toward developing a 6-month conditional probational period that the company and the community would agree to. And if that's the case, and then the business would be open, but that it would be conditional for a 6-month period. So that way the community will be clearly protected in terms of the business doing what they need to do. Is my motion.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Lewis.
That motion moving properly second. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Newton, you recognize.
This is Shakise Newton. Yes, I just want to make sure that I heard your motion correctly, Mr. Chair. So that motion was that the business would remain closed until November 30th, during which time a probationary plan would be put together for the establishment?
Yes, and that probation plan will be a 6-month conditional probational plan. In other words, if they violated the probation during that 6-month period, it would be revoked.
And it would be whose responsibility to develop that probationary plan, Mr. Chair?
That's what I said, council and the community. We will feedback from the community.
Okay, I'm unclear on what that would look like. I certainly support the probationary plan. I just don't know if council is responsible with the community, you know, what exactly that looks like. And also, I'm not opposed to 6 months, but is there an opportunity for flexibility? I mean, if it's clearly not working before that, I don't know if we need to, how long we need to drag it out, but
up to 6 months. I didn't mean definitely up to 6 months, no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, would law enforcement be
Yes.
part of that?
Any further discussions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Brown, you recognize.
Very briefly, don't want to throw any monkey wrenches in this conversation. I believe I heard earlier Mr. Smith communicate that this council could take any disposition of this issue they saw fit to address this item. I know there is some wording in our ordinance. I just want to make sure that although it's not necessarily limited to revocation or reinstatement, that we do have the flexibility, as Mr. Smith communicated, to make those decisions to do something other than those two things, since the ordinance does not speak to that any form of suspension or other status of a license.
Was that a question or?
I'm not necessarily sure if it's a question. I just wanted to make sure that just saying that the ordinance does not speak to any other license status. So I'm just bringing that up. And so if that's something that needs to be addressed by Mr. Smith, then that's great. I just don't
Okay.
want the council to be in a position where there's not a status that is addressed and that we're holding something in the status that then from the business officer's perspective, there is no such status.
Mr. Livingston,
Yes.
I think the ordinance speaks to, for purposes of this appeal, either upholding the decision or denying the action that's been taken, or council fashioning in any other remedy that it deems appropriate. So as I said earlier, that to me indicates that it was the council's intent when they passed this ordinance not to necessarily be bound by one or the other option, that in looking at each of these instances on a case-by-case basis, the council would have the flexibility to determine what the appropriate remedy would be. Now, in terms of fashioning your remedy, I do think it's important to keep in mind, and again, I was trying to listen at what you were proposing in terms of your motion, that if this business was going to operate, it needed to operate legally, and that would be with a business license. So when you're talking about the issue of them being on probation, which is what I believe you said.
Yes.
I do think that the status of their license needs to be a part of the discussion during the periods of time that we're speaking about.
Right.
Or that your motion contemplates.
Okay. Ms. Newton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one additional question for you as maker of the motion. When you're looking at your November 30th date, is that like with the 6 months and up to November 30th date, or is that a hard date?
I'm okay with up to November 30th. But, I don't think much will happen before then, but yeah. I meant for it to be a hard date, but I'm flexible. Any other discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, I had a period of time there when the sound was not working, so could you restate the motion, please?
The motion was the license remain suspended until November 30th. And between now and November 30th, we'll work out some kind of 6-month conditional probation plan. So what that would mean is the community and everybody would look at, a conditional probational plan for 6 months, and the community, if the business meet the requirements in that period of time, then their license will be fully established.
Okay, so we've got up to November 30th to work on this. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And then move forward with a 6-month probation?
Yes.
During the 6 month, they're allowed to operate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Livingston.
Yes.
Just one matter regarding your motion, and I'd ask for clarification from the Business Service Center director, but I believe that at this point, the license has been revoked as opposed to suspended. And I think your motion was that the license.
It'll remain revoked.
Okay.
Whatever it is.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
If I could be recognized, please.
Yes, please. Anything you do to help.
all business licenses expire on December 31st. If the 6-month probation is to take effect on December 1, if we can state when the 6-month probation is intended to end, which would be May 30th because of the December date, but again, with the business licenses expiring on December 31st, keep that in mind as it relates to how long we want to have the probationary license, if you will, for the 2021 license.
Okay, so if we said up,
Potentially,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, potentially what we could do is, based on what I'm hearing, is to have the business license for 2021 issued conditionally for 5 months, because the December month would be that first month of the probationary period.
Okay, we can work that out. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but you're still doing 6 months, but you're doing it different with the license. I got you.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand. And thanks very much. Any other questions? Again, that substitute motion moved in second. Let's have a discussion now. Any further question on the substitute motion? If not, I'll ask Ms. Arnold to call the roll for the substitute motion.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker,
No.
Manning,
Yes.
Myers, Newton.
Yes. Myers is yes. Newton is yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Quick question for clarification.
Yes.
That means they're still closed, correct?
Yes.
And if there's no resolution, they'll stay closed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I move for reconsideration.
Motion for reconsideration. Is there a second?
Second.
Moving properly second. Ms. Arnold can cover roll for reconsideration.
Yes, sir. Malinowski,
No.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Walker, Manning,
No.
Myers,
No.
Newton.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank
Chairman,
you.
I move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Moving properly second. Ms. Arnold, call the roll for adjournment.
Yes, sir.
Somebody on the phone.
Livingston,
Yes.
Malinowski's a yes. There was all kinds of squawking in there. I couldn't hear you.
Horatio,
Yes.
Walker, Manning,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Meeting's adjourned.